Woman. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about something I found, and it's pretty interesting. I'm going to be talking about MVP Montavious Porter, and he explains WWE's booking politics, losing streaks, and doghouse survival. And this is courtesy of, pardon me, let me get my facts together. This is courtesy of Marking Out with MVP and Dwayne Swayze. So hosted by longtime friends Montavious Porter, or MVP, and Houston-based rapper and songwriter Dwayne Swayze. Marking Out takes you inside the world of professional wrestling like never before. So in this episode, MVP breaks down the politics, psychology, and professionalism behind losing a match in pro wrestling, and why it's not always a bad thing, from taking losses to elevate the hurt business to being buried during a months-long doghouse stint in WWE. MVP shares raw insight on how ego, timing, and storyline shape outcomes behind the curtain. He unpacks the misunderstood terms jobber and burial, reveals how being booked to lose can actually turn a heel into a babyface, and opens up about the infamous Undertaker Brock Lesnar streak ending with stories about working with MJF, Chris Jericho, and Cody Rhodes. MVP reveals how real pros navigate match changes, protect their credibility, and play the long game. From chaotic last-minute finishes to the art of improvisation on live TV, this episode also explores how real-time changes like Vince McMahon changing outcomes seconds before airtime, separate workers from stars. MVP shares behind-the-scenes gems from matches with Cody Rhodes, tag team storytelling with Matt Hardy, and the legendary road stories that never made it to TV, with raw, unfiltered insight from one of the most respected veterans in the business. And this will be part one. So let's get down to it. I'm going to try to play the introduction. I don't know if they're going to try to block this or not, but I'm going to try. We'll see. Let's get down to it.
Another day, another dollar as I holler to the world. I love the way I'm living, love the Gucci, love the girls, love the parties and the clubs, love the models and hot tubs, love the German engineering set on deep dish guns. Another tour around the world, entertaining the fans. I love walking through the airport, taking pictures, shaking hands. Every day from music noise to crack it open, find the pearl. I love the way I'm living, is what I holler to the world. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Marking Out with MVP and Dwayne Swayze. I'm Dwayne Swayze, and as always, I'm sitting next to a man who made an impact the second he stepped onto the scene. A former champion, a world-traveled competitor, and someone who told the world from day one there's not a better athlete on the planet than MVP.
I might stress the truth just a little bit.
The strongest, the fastest. That was October 2006. Do you remember that promo?
I don't.
Right on.
I just be up there lying. But a good heel always lies. And George Costanza said, it's not a lie if you believe it.
Facts. All right, so today, first question of the day, P. How does a wrestler handle being told they're losing in a match, especially if they don't agree with it?
A lot of them not very well. So getting right down to business, it is the business. And, a lot of the time, a lot of pro wrestlers, it's an ego-driven business. Let's just be honest. It's an ego-driven business. And, especially if you're very passionate and if you care. Some guys that have been in the business long enough understand how the machine works. And, I think Al Snow made it famous back in the day, pen me, pay me, job squad. I don't even care anymore, man. There's a check clear. I don't care,
Hey, Olivia Martin.
I even went through that phase where, I don't care. But I also understand understand, like, from a business perspective, like when we did the Hurt business, I understood the dynamic of how we were operating, and I said, okay, let me take the pinfalls. Keep Bobby and Sheldon strong. Let me take pinfalls. So if, in ever to advance the storyline, the Hurt business had to lose, I
This
was
is
the one that
Black
took the
Wrestling
pin.
So
News.
psychologically, does that play into like the audience that's watching it?
Well, yeah, it does, because, you know,
MVP
after a
talking
while, you
about the
start to
biz.
see somebody lose
What's up, Jay?
most of the time or all the time, and then in your head you go, okay, well, or the term that a lot of people use and use it incorrectly, a jobber. Oh, you're a jobber. He's a jobber. Oh, they jobbed him out. You know, it's like, in some cases, yeah, this guy's a jobber. His job is to put other people over. And in my case, specifically with the Hurt Syndicate, I was being selfless for the group. Like, I understood the dynamic. Got to protect the Almighty. He can't take any else.
Right.
The dynamic where Sheldon was at the time before Vince threw him off the cliff. You know, when I was in the doghouse, you know, '07 MVP was beating everybody.
Yeah.
Was rating that. Then some backstage issues caused me to go into the doghouse, and I lost for like 6 months or something like that.
I remember that.
And one of the messed up things about is, you know, things have changed there. But back then, when you had heat, nobody pulled you to the side and sat you down and said, "Hey, look, man, you got heat right now. You're in the doghouse, so this is how things are gonna be."
And can you define heat?
Heat is when you are in trouble with management. Or you can have heat in the locker room with the boys when you've done something that's put you in a position where you're persona non grata. You know?
Hands off.
So I had heat. And I remember, you know, being kind of heated about having heat, because some of it came from some misunderstandings, and some of it came from me sticking up for myself. And, you know, I remember saying, like, man, I've never been face down in my food and catering. You know, I don't have a drug problem. I show up, you know, and, you know, that's for another time. But ultimately, I realized every week when I showed up to work, the whole storyline was that I can't win. I'm losing. I lost to Funaki. I lost to Kizarni. Most people, you don't even remember Kizarni. Nick, you know, he had a short run on TV. And I remember, the crazy thing was, on the live events, I remember losing every week. And you could hear, like, the reaction from the crowd, where at first it was like, that's good, you lost.
Yeah.
Then it was like, wait a minute, man. Why is
Exactly.
we like him, man. Why is he losing like this, you know? And what they actually succeeded in doing, inadvertently, was turning me into a baby face, because the crowds, the fans liked me so much as a heel that they started to cheer for me. They wanted to see me win. They wanted me to get back to my winning ways. And from being the heel that I was, I got organically turned into a baby face. But back to psychologically, you know, how you deal with it, I was making a lot of money still. And no, of course I wanted to be the champion, and I wanted to win, and I wanted to be pushed. But I also understood, okay, I'm in the doghouse. I'm in trouble right now. There have been other wrestlers greater than me that spent time in the doghouse, came out of it triumphantly, and went on to have great careers. Stick it out. Take yours on the chin. Keep doing good work. And, you know, there were times when in my head, I would be like, man, I'm just going to go out here and go through the motions, man. I don't even want to. But my professionalism won't allow me to do that. So I'd get out there and I'd still put everything into it, whether I was up or down. It didn't matter. I couldn't just go out there and go through the motions. I didn't know how to do that. And strangely enough, you know, things turned around, and then they decided, well, wait a minute, let's get him back on his winning ways, and let's give him a little push again, and let's start him back. But I learned a big lesson from that. You know, everybody wants to win, but everybody can't win. Mm-hmm. You know, Brock Lesnar is Brock Lesnar because everybody lost to him. Roman Reigns is Roman Reigns because everybody lost to him. You know, everybody has to be on board to build that dominant superstar. So when that superstar finally loses to someone, the person who beats him is made.
It means something.
Right. And a lot of people, I see a lot of fans making comments on social media about, oh, they buried this guy, or they're burying these guys. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know when you use the term burial, you don't know what it means. You're not burying somebody because they lose a match or two or what have you. That's not burying somebody. But in order to make somebody, you have to have somebody who is made. Somebody who's virtually unbeatable, or high tier. So when somebody underneath beats them, oh wow, that person comes up.
Now, I'm not trying to start anything, but
Oh,
this brings me to the streak, and Brock Lesnar beating Undertaker. Both are already made. So in a case like that, what do you think about that?
I don't know why that happened, and I've never talked to Undertaker about it. I've never asked him. Don't know the story behind it. That was above my pay grade. I have no idea. It was my personal opinion that if anybody deserved to have a streak not be broken, it was the Undertaker.
The Undertaker.
For everything he's done for that company. The time he was working wearing the Phantom of the Opera mask because he had a crushed orbital, that was my opinion. You're not starting anything, but I'm a big fan of Brock. We work closely together with Bobby and with Omos, and, bring me whiskey. So in that deal, and obviously, Taker's a pro, he did it, and if anybody could have said, no, I'm not doing it, Taker was definitely the one that could have done that. So you got some guys that, will have a little temper tantrum and, get upset, and or, as we say, they have the boo-boo face. There's one guy, I like him a lot, so I won't say his name, but I was really disappointed in how he reacted when he found out he had to lose a match. And the situation, he was really upset that, he had to lose. And I was like, dude, this is pro wrestling. Like, we all have to lose at some point. It's your job to lose. And, and you have some guys, if they have enough cachet, that go, nope, I'm not doing it. And, whoever the boss is has to go and talk to them and try to reason with them. And, some people have that kind of cachet where, if you're a Brock Lesnar or an Undertaker or, famously Stone Cold Steve Austin when they wanted him to lose to Brock.
Oh, yeah.
If you have enough, the gravitas, if you're a big enough box office star, you can say no. And then the promoter either has to deal with it or come up with a way to persuade you to do it. Sometimes it takes more money. If I recall correctly, Jeff Jarrett, when he put China over, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I think Jeff Jarrett made an extra six figures on that. I think he said, okay, I'll do it, but I want this much money to do it, And I hope I'm telling that correctly. I think that's correctly. I don't want to misquote Jeff, but I'm pretty sure that's how it went down. And then there are other stories throughout wrestling history of guys who didn't want to put somebody over and charged a hefty price to do it, And typically, I'm at a point in my career where, there are certain guys that I don't have a problem losing to. But there are certain people that just because of where I'm at in my career and where they're at, like, no, man, I'm not,
No, we're not doing
You
that.
never kicked out of the Undertaker's choke slam.
Right.
But then I also understand that there are some young guys that, and I learned this from Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho campaigned for me to beat him one day in a match. And Chris Jericho said, it doesn't hurt me to lose to you, but it does a lot for you to beat me. And he campaigned for me to win. And I learned that, and they're like, okay, yeah, there's certain, like when I was at MLW with MJF, we had a match, I put MJF over. And he reminds me of that person, and it didn't hurt me. And where he was at his time in his career, coming up, it was a really good win for him. And that's the professionalism. So the guys who don't want to lose, sometimes they have a legitimate gripe and saying, no, I don't want to lose this one, man. It doesn't make sense. But at the end of the day, we all have a job. When you go to work, if your boss tells you, hey, man, empty the trash.
All right.
You either empty the trash
Or you going
or you punch out.
Yeah, right on.
And that's kind of what it comes down to. So it's a matter of professionalism. You want to have a boo-boo face and you want to complain and have a tantrum and, okay, you're not being a pro. There's lots of times that professionals feel like I shouldn't lose this match, but this is what the boss wants, and this is how the game goes. So that's kind of how that works.
Right on.
Hold on, we gotta do a toast, man. One time,
Two
for those of
G's.
us who like the
Real
good stuff,
G's.
I can tell you, I'm really digging Devil's River. Dave, we gotta have a talk. That's how it tastes.
My boys, man, my boy.
How much of a storyline is planned in advance, and how often do plans change last minute?
Oh, that's okay. So storylines generally are. This is another one of those questions where it kind of depends on where you work and how they like to do their business. But WWE typically storylines are planned out over a period of months. You have long-term storylines. You have shorter-term storylines. You have just TV feuds where it's you're just feuding with somebody for a few weeks for TV. It's not necessarily a long-term storyline. As we see in WWE, likes long-term storylines. AEW focuses less on long-term storylines. Impact, they would do long-term storylines. And it just comes down to who's in charge of creative and how they want to tell stories. As far as how things change, there's so many factors in that. If somebody gets hurt, everything changes. You got this planned out for months with this guy, and he breaks an ankle. Well, that whole storyline has to change now. You don't really have last-minute storyline changes, but depending on who's in charge, again, sometimes from a creative point of view, something could happen where they decide, you know what, we're going to change this, and instead of wrestler A winning, I want wrestler B to win. And Vince would do things like that. He would just, on a whim, he just changed his mind about something. Matches, things change all the time at the last second. Storylines are a little different because there's a story with a means to an end usually. The idea is to take wrestler A, wrestler B, get them through these beats, these stories, these matches, and then finish the story with one of those wrestlers being victorious. So storylines don't usually change at the last second unless there's an injury or something like that, as I said. Matches, however, change sometimes while you're in the ring, middle of a match. It happens all the time. I haven't been in any storylines that I can think of that got changed at the last minute. Sometimes you'll see where you're in a storyline and you'll start to see where things are kind of changing. And again, it also depends on where you're at on the card. If you're a top guy, you have a lot of input into what you want to do and how you want to do it. If you're mid-card or lower, you don't have nearly as much say, if any. This is what you're doing, this is where we're going, and this is how it's going to happen. Sometimes they don't even discuss with you what your storyline is, unless you're at a certain point. You just show up, go to work, and do what you're told. But once you get to a certain point, you have some input, or you'll have, writers or, producers that'll contact you and say, okay, here's what we're doing. They'll sit down and say, okay, man, you guys are going to have this program, this story, and we're going to do this, and it's going to go this way. So you have an idea that we're going to be married for the next 3 months. And that's always fun because you have an idea of where you're going and what you're doing. And then at that point, you can talk to the person that you're working with and, hey, what about this idea? What about that idea? And you give suggestions. Me and Matt Hardy were married for 9 months or something.
He never beat you, right?
Never. I never lost to Matt Hardy. Never. I never lost a match to Matt Hardy. Never lost a match to Jeff Hardy. And I'm the captain of the team. I'm going to put my C right there. But it was cool because that whole storyline thing where we were the co-tag champs. Matt, here's something for you guys. Most of you probably didn't know. Matt and Mr. Kennedy originally talked about doing that. But Kennedy was out hurt. Matt told me about the idea. Asked Ken if he'd be cool if Matt pitched it for us. Of course, Ken, yeah, go do it. We pitched it. Vince loved it. And it became like one of the bedrock stories of my career, you know.
So that if Mr. Kennedy wasn't injured, that could have potentially been him and Matt.
And Ken as tag champs feuding over the U.S. title.
Wow.
But in this case, it worked, you know, and no disrespect to Ken, Ken's my guy. It would have been great with them because they're such tremendously talented guys. But I think the contrast with me and Matt probably made it work a little bit better. And man, it was fun. And it kind of got put on hold for a little bit because Matt legitimately got injured. And, you know, people were, certain fans might remember MVP climbing up to the top of the ladder at the Money in the Bank match, and I got the briefcase, and here comes Matt Hardy through the crowd, climbs the ladder, twists the fade off the top of the ladder, and took my moment from me. Damn you, Matt Hardy. But that turned into where, and this was a kind of cool thing because up until that point, I didn't have the relationship with Vince that we had after that, where there'd be a line of people waiting to see Vince after TV. And Vince, you know, there'd be writers, other talent, you know, producers, just a line outside his office door. And me and Matt would walk up because we'd want to pitch something, you know, for our storyline idea. And we'd be like, man, is everybody waiting to see Vince? And they'd be, oh, yeah, we're all waiting. And we're like, oh, okay, I guess we'll get in line. And Vince would come out and look at the line. Matt, MVP, get in here. Come on in here, guys. Yeah, that's my boys. You know, we're like, oh, well, yeah, excuse me, guys.
Sorry, guys.
All right, this is going to be part one, probably of a two-part segment. So enjoy it. I'm going to let it run for a few days, and then I'll be back. MVP, Montavious Porter, sitting down talking about the biz. Thank you for watching Black Wrestling News. Tyrone Bowman.